Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup, where D-Base and Chris Hanna are going to ruminate on the great and spacious beehive. Today is May 14th, 2023. This is episode 59, where Chris Hanna of Porchtime, he's going to co-host. We're going to go over how the media is claiming that Mormons want to kill gay Ugandans. And also, Elder Cook is tweeting about the Book of Mormon and how it's consistent. LDS missionaries, they're leaving referral cards in libraries in public libraries in Virginia. And also, a Mormon mom poisons her husband. And finally, the Salt Lake Temple is getting a new feature. We've got a big episode here for you. Now, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm at MormonNewsRoundup.org. That's www.MormonNewsRoundup.org. Or you can send me an email to collab@MormonNewsRoundup.org. Now, I'd like to bring Chris onto the program. Chris, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Hey, great. Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup. Now, you founded a program that's called Porchtime, which is where I very first came across you in Porchtime. When did you start that, and what is that all about?
Oh, it's been a little over a year. It started largely just because I had appeared a couple times on Jonathan Streeter's channel, Thinker of Thoughts. And my friend Flip, who is there looking like the monk, he and I have been talking about doing a general podcast like this for years. He and I have been around the ex-Mormon, post-Mormon blogging or podcast scene for years and years and years, but never really started our own. He's appeared all the way back. You could hear him on several Mormon Stories episodes or on some Sunstone appearances. I never really jumped on to anything in the past, although I did appear once on Feminist Mormon Housewives years and years ago. But we decided to jump on because we were noticing that there was a certain kind of bent to most of the post-Mormon or ex-Mormon podcasts, and we thought we'd put a different flavor out.
Yeah, so I want to say the channel, it says here from the description, is for any current LDS, ex-LDS, or never LDS types who are on similar pages politically. Classical, liberal, libertarian, anarchist, conservative, anywhere right of authoritarian leftists, and are tired of wokeness infiltrating both the LDS and ex-Mo worlds simultaneously. Good, Chris, what is that? I'm a simple man. What does that mean?
Yeah, we break into it. I don't even remember, when did I write that? That seems like forever ago. But yeah, we talk a lot about, so I'll give you an example right now. Generally, Mormon Stories is going to have on Michael Shermer in a couple of weeks. We are big Michael Shermer fans. We've Flip even has some signed books from Michael Shermer. We've hung around Michael Shermer. We were around the new atheist scene in the 2000s. We got to watch what happened with the new atheist convention scene as that kind of dissected and fell apart around something called Elevator Gate, which was like the movement of a lot of different things, such as getting into concepts of social justice and that. And it really kind of destroyed the new atheism movement. And it's something that's come up on Mormon Stories here and there as they've had different people like Anthony Magnavas go on, Cara Santa Maria, people who know about this stuff. They asked them about it. We're great big fans of Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, and we follow those people who also came out of that scene. And for some people, if they want to look it up, they might know what I'm talking about in general there. But what the point of it all is that those Michael Shermer, who's going on that podcast, if you follow his tweets right now, we have been kicked off of Mormon Stories podcast, Facebook pages and stuff like that for saying the same types of concepts and same types of things. And now he's going on to Mormon Stories in a couple of weeks to talk about irrationality and all that sort of deal. We wanted to point at and poke at the point that there's certain things that you're generally not allowed to talk about. And some of that is queer theory. Some of that is things like critical race theory, these things that have become buzzwords. But one of the deals is it's all the way back when I was on Mormon Stories, or we were going to Mormon Stories, we'd go to the lives, Flip would go on. I wouldn't appear on it. But from that time frame, I'd already read that stuff. I came through graduate school at the University of Utah, literature department. I was even kind of a believer in that sort of stuff in a general sort of sense, not all the way. I mean, I read it. The deal is that we're pretty well read in it. If you've read the book Cynical Theories, which I've gone over with Jonathan Streeter on his podcast, we've gone over 1 or 2 chapters of that book. It gets into the detail of what critical theory is and how postmodernism works itself into modern day academia. And I even have some ways I reconcile postmodernism, but we're not coming at it from like a Fox News standpoint. Fox News picked up on this stuff years after we were all already into it. It picked up from people like James Lindsay and others who have gone into studies about it, although I studied it long before he did. So we're not coming at it from the sort of brutish angle. We actually come at it from an angle of having done the homework and read the sorts of details. And I even had a post on Feminist Mormon Housewives years ago talking about concepts like, what is it? Concepts like cultural appropriation and that sorts of deal. And it was probably like 2011 or something like that. And so I've become, or not, I've made jokes as I've appeared on other podcasts. I've appeared on shows like Quick Media or with Jacob Hansen, that sort of stuff, that you could say that I had a falling away from the church or whatever, but I feel like the larger fallout of a church in my lifetime has been falling out of humanities academia, and or just starting to disbelieve in some of the true claims and types of ideas of that come out of those academic philosophical traditions. But then we also bring it into the pop world and talk about it in the pop world. But we, I would say that somebody who's kind of getting big in the news right now is Mary Harrington. We're going to do a podcast on Mary Harrington. She's somebody who calls herself a reactionary feminist, and her new book is Feminism Against Progress. And that's almost kind of my spirit animal. If you've read her book, I've read her book already. If you read through it, it's almost kind of like coming at this whole entire concept, what I call postmodern traditionalism. You go all the way through, all the way to the other end of stuff, and you become reactionary to some of the ideas because you realize there's a dialectical movement of the concepts of wokeness becoming corporatized, neoliberalized, becoming reified and alienating. And those are all kind of big words that are kind of hinting at something, but it's really hard to sum it up. And part of what we've had to do is kind of poke at and pull out moments minute by minute by minute of what we're talking about. And that's what we've been doing for a couple of years.
Yeah. So it seems like it's really hard to put you and your show into a comfy box. Is that deliberate?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually just kind of who we are, because I mean, we're not really technically right wing. Most of us are classical liberals and liberals, but skeptical of what that stuff is. But we invite in other people who kind of think on that libertarian or anarchist or even just basic conservative level. There's Kevin, who's on my podcast, who's an active believing member, and we kind of align that way. And so one of the things that we also get into is that where maybe some of the people who sort of did leave the church and leave it alone, if that makes sense. The people complain that ex-Mormons can't do that, but in a libertarian way, most of the people that we are around don't buy into a lot of the general concepts that it causes as much harm as they claim it causes in ex-Mormon blogs and all that sort of stuff. So there's this weird kind of reconciliation thing of saying, hey, we struggle believing it, but we don't hate it, and we never hated it. And we also don't agree with a lot of the ways certain things get painted. Some of the stuff we do agree with, like we're going to go over, you said later, some ideas that maybe Uganda's getting out of control. We're going to disagree with that, but if there's other stuff from the other way through queer theory, and we go into detail about queer theory because we've actually read like Judith Butler or Eve Sedgwick or a lot of the different writers of second, third wave, fourth wave feminism. I mean, it's not your Fox News level talking about wokeness. We can define wokeness. That stuff all became, as it happens, a bit more. It became memed. It became something that just spreads out and it goes out to the people, and it gets hard to define because concept creep happens, but that happens on both sides. I mean, get them to define the word fascism. You can't get them to define it either. What people who are critical of that. So stuff gets difficult in the world of definitions, but that's one of our things that we get into, is talking about the philosophy and concepts and difficulties of definitions and Derrida and words and Foucault, and how all this stuff gets played with to play ideological games that to me are just as religious as any sort of religious tradition.
So basically, you're an ex-Mormon podcast that mostly criticizes ex-Mormons. Do I have that right?
No, because there's a lot of people inside of Mormonism who do the same stuff. That's one of the reasons I was invited on to Quick Media shows to talk about it with them, of how it happens inside of BYU. One of the persons we point out and look at what he does is Dan McClellan, he's making the rounds. I mean, if you ask me, yes, he's probably ex-Mormon, but he still wears the mask. But so yeah, we generally are, but at the same time too, we're not critical of all ex-Mormons. Like if there's people who are just kind of sticking to facts, that's been one of the larger things that's happened in the post-Mormon world, is there's been this argument of like about, are we coming at this now about truth claims, or are we coming at this now from morality activism claims? And there's a fight between that, and there's always a struggle between that. It's one of the reasons you see people like Kate Kelly and denounce John DeLynn. And one of the things she doesn't like is people going into hard historical truth claims, because that's not relevant or important to our moralistic activistic claims. And if we see people like, say, maybe like a Dan Vogel, who just kind of does stick to facts and history and that sort of stuff, we're going to have very little criticism for Dan Vogel. If they're just going over the details of history and that sort of thing, that's not really what we're digging into. RFM will stick to it, but then every single different podcast will, there's a general bent, like I said, that they act like neutrality. It's one of the things that comes out of the humanities departments, and what we're critical of that whole thing is their neutral is not neutral. Their neutral is a left-wing bias, and that's one of the things Jonathan Haidt's pointed out over years. And that's what I'd say is where we are generally critical, is when people are coming. It's going to come up in that Balenciaga thing. The Streeter points it out, but it's the quotes that John DeLynn says, is he's constantly claiming that he's neutral, and no, he's heavily political. And a 501c3 is not supposed to be that political, but we all know how those games goes. But that's part of just what we're pointing out. And there's a level of it that we're fine if you're political. Just stop playing that it's neutral.
Well, luckily, the Mormon News Roundup is not a 501c3, so we don't have to be neutral. So that's now.
Well, you do a better job at it. You bring on whoever and talk to whoever, but that's been part of one of the deals, is that in the ex-Mormon world, they act like they have this big open level of free association, but they actually really kind of avoid anybody who's able to make a capable argument. I mean, if they're going to talk about a right-wing person or talk about Mormons, like the Mormons that they paint isn't my family. That's not my family. My family is not some MAGA loving whatever. And most of the people I grew up in around here in Salt Lake, Salt Lake's very liberal Mormon. They're very, very liberal. And I don't know who John DeLynn's talking about when he's talking about conservative Mormons, although I'm sure they're out there. Of course they're out there, but it's not who I know and what I've grown up and been around. But then secondly, we try to still man people who are that. But if he's going to bring somebody on, it's going to be kind of a straw man buffoon MAGA person. There's just no real area for anybody to have any sort of thoughtful or intelligent level of pushback or reactionary pushback. And even that word, I'm sure, becomes like a buzzword for him, although it's taking on new meanings. But that's kind of one of the points is myself and Jonathan Streeter, we do here and there, we'll push back on them or say something. Jonathan Streeter will make a post about, hey, you're having Michael Shermer on. Look what Michael Shermer thinks about different ideas of queer theory. And that post got deleted and removed from Mormon Stories podcast. But Michael Shermer's coming on. You'll probably avoid the subjects that we got deleted off of your Facebook page for mentioning that he talks about currently and recently. And that's just kind of some of the things that we point out. And there's a lot of different things like that. But generally, if people are just talking facts and truth or their feelings, I mean, we don't generally just go after that. It's kind of just this level of it's what's driven a lot of conservative people crazy in the past 4 or 5, 6, 7 years, when you have a media that's showing its high level of bias, or you have Hollywood showing high level of bias, or you have academia showing its high level of bias, things that have been teased out by people like Jonathan Haidt to show that it's not just in our heads, but then pretending like that's neutrality.
Yeah. By the way, we did have from Porchtime, for those people out there, we'll link to Porchtime in the show notes. We did have Jared on, who's one of your Porchtime hosts there. We had him on the Mormon News Roundup back on episode 38. So we have had him on. Now, I tried to get Jonathan Streeter on this podcast, but he bailed after only 19 minutes. So I'm going to see, Chris, if you can last. We're at 15. So you're coming right up to the edge here, where a lot of people
only 4 to go.
There's a lot of people start to wonder why they're here. So hopefully you can last a little longer. But the funny thing is, though, Chris, is that I met your nephew Jackson Hanna yesterday, who's currently serving a full-time missionary. And guess what? We realized he's serving a full-time missionary right here in my ward here in Northern Virginia. And here he is, a handsome fella. I met him yesterday, had him over for dinner. And he's tracking here. This is a famous street here called Hill Cumorah Drive. There was an LDS land developer here in the 90s who built a bunch of streets that have Mormon callbacks like Zion Road and things like that. So I remember, first of all, I was a missionary here in my own ward that I'm in here in Northern Virginia back in the 90s. I was a missionary right here. So Jackson is serving the same mission that I currently that I served in the 90s and that I currently live in. So the coincidence here is really remarkable. And after we made this, figured this out, we had him over for dinner here, and he's plugging the show. That's a surprise. That's surprising. We got full-time missionaries here plugging the Mormon News Roundup. That is a surprise. That is a surprise, Chris.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was wild. That's amazing. Because I showed you the picture, and the next day he was over for eating there with you. I haven't seen him since he left almost a year ago, and I hope he's doing well. I know that's tough out there. It's funny because my parents have heard whiff that like somebody told them that I was on Quick Show or something like that. Other than that, they haven't really checked into it. I don't know if they'll end up seeing this or watching. Now, I don't advertise any of this stuff out. That's one of the things people might complain about is I don't put it out on my Facebook. I don't put it on my social media, any such thing like that. But it's just because we're just speaking our minds and we're doing that. Plus, there's a level of it, and I frequently joke that we're South Parkian. Like, we're not worried about being PC or cracking jokes or cracking wise or that sort of deal. But I don't make like a big show of it. I don't go pushing it out there. It just kind of gets legs on its own as you see different people get very frustrated with those other podcasts that seem to be all that's on the menu, and people will kind of poke around and like, well, hey, have you checked these guys out? And they'll go look at it. And then secondly, because I've appeared on things like Midnight Mormons or Jacob Hansen's podcast, we get some active members who come in and start listening to us because of maybe some of our critiques and ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, one last thing to wrap up that I played him in basketball. I just want you to know, Chris, that I did play him in basketball. There I am with my son. I played him in basketball, and I just want to let you know that I crushed him. That's important for me. I don't play any games when it comes to home court advantage. And we all did have a good time, though. It was really fun to, the thing about it is I just want to let you know, if he has any baptisms in this area, I warmed up all of the doors in this area 25 years ago. I knocked every single one of those doors. And so
is it picked over?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's been knocked many times since, but this has been a very warmed over area. But I definitely wish him the very, very best. We had him over for dinner. We had pizza. We had a good time. It was fun to talk to him. He's been out for like 11 months now, right?
Yeah, he's getting there. I know that he's done pretty well. I see the updates. He sends the family updates, and he seems like he's having fun. But I also know it's a tough time. It's a tough time in life. I served my mission in Mexico City 20 years ago. And to me, it seems like, with my family, we meet up every month or so. And to me, it still seems like, I just barely saw him. He might be off to college or something like that. I just barely saw him. I'm sure in his head, those 11 months feel very, very, very long. That's how they felt to me. And so it's so wild to me to see him there with you. But I'm at the same time, in my brain, I'm like, well, we just hung out the other day at his farewell. Oh my gosh, that's been a year. And,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
If you want to get in touch with us, by the way, for here at the Mormon News Roundup, you can come on over to Twitter. We're at News Mormon, and we also drop all of these episodes onto YouTube. That brings us to our Mormon News Roundup joke of the week here, and you got the joke of the week here. What are we about to see here with the joke of the week here? What are we about to see here, Chris?
So there's a meme that just suddenly got popular in 2023 of putting these AI use and making it's called like the Balenciaga, my Balenciaga meme, and people would take like characters from Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or whatever and make AI versions of them seeming like Balenciaga models. And Jonathan Streeter jumped on that and made the Balenciaga meme, but made it with a bunch of ex-Mormon bloggers and kind of put in some kind of corny phrases that you might hear pop out from them. And
okay,
let's cracks me up.
I haven't watched this yet, but we have superimposed faces of supposedly ex-Mormons here. This ought to be good. Let's see what we got.
When I can interview faithful Mormons in my Balenciaga.
It's RFM.
The purest form of a faith transition is this. One must deconstruct all that is not Balenciaga. What will remain is all that is Balenciaga.
Whoa, there's Jonathan Streeter.
Yeah, he put himself in.
Sorry, who's that?
That's Rock.
All my
Rock
briefs are made by Balenciaga.
Water.
Even my legal one.
Alan Rockman.
Oh, okay.
That's Nemo.
Oh, right.
Bill Real.
Right.
from each according to their abilities, to each according to their need to appreciate the majestic grandeur of Balenciaga. Fashion socialism is superior.
Wow. That's Nene Noah.
Yeah.
That which is normative is oppressive. Liberate yourself from categories. There is no one truth, except the truth of Balenciaga.
Zelf on the Shelf.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, who's that?
That's Alan Mount.
Oh.
It's from Marriage on a String or whatever.
Oh.
Thinker of thoughts on things and stuff. My thoughts can only be of my Balenciaga.
Bangers, Britain, Brethren, Balenciaga.
Oh boy.
My unrequited love affair with words has endowed me with complete deniable plausibility in my love for Balenciaga.
Naturally.
Yeah, it cracks me up.
Okay, here's the plan. We break into the temple and film a Balenciaga commercial. I'm kidding, or am I? No, really. I'm totally not planning on doing exactly that. I don't already have the footage.
Going through the dark night of the soul can be devastating. But Balenciaga will make you look fabulous as your entire worldview and self-conception crumble in a puddle of doubt and nihilistic despair.
Oh no, that doesn't sound fun.
When you really start to pull at the threads of reality and zoom out, you see that the world is just a systematic system of interconnected systems. True liberation is found in the dismantling of these systems. Thus, the emergence of Balenciaga is manifest.
Naturally.
Balenciaga is nonpartisan and non-political, just like Mormon Stories podcast.
I love it. I love it.
My new faith and spiritual paradigm is far superior to Mormonism.
Yeah.
It's based on empathy, compassion, and the inherent moral superiority of Balenciaga.
That is too funny. That's a good joke. That's a very, very good joke. Okay, so that brings us into our first news article here for this week here. And well, we have a long prelude, but that's okay. So, hey, this first article here is the Securities and Exchange Commission issues largest ever whistleblower award of $279 million. Now, we don't know who is the recipient of this handsome purse. And I was wondering, is this David Nielsen? But the thing about it is that the whistleblower awards are supposed to be between 10 and 30% of the total purse, and the church and Ensign Peak was only fined $5 million. So it makes me wonder. I don't think this is David Nielsen. We don't have the answer as to who it is, but I do wonder, could this possibly be David Nielsen? It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, that's so much money. I was looking at it, seeing that maybe he's going to appear on 60 Minutes or something like that. So the timing of it all seems to line up, but that money amount doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So this has been leaked as well, and that we have a couple of reports now that this Sunday that we are recording this on Saturday, and it will be released on Sunday. We have that 60 Minutes reports on the $100 billion fortune built by the church's secretive investment arm. Whistleblower David Nielsen will break his multi-year silence and speak with Sharon Alfonsi. Other guests with insight on church wealth, Ensign Peak, and the SEC order will also be there. I went on the 60 Minutes website. I don't see anything. I don't know if this is legend and rumor, but it seems to be pretty well substantiated. And they're also going to have a member of the presiding bishopric on board too. Apparently, it's going to be the first council. There's 3 presiding bishops. It's going to be, I think it's the first counselor, Stephen Waddell. He has served in the church's presiding bishopric. I don't think he's a counselor, actually. The presiding bishopric, they're all just bishops. There's no counselors. So he's in the presiding bishopric. He's the number 2 guy behind David Causet. And legend has it that he is going to be on 60 Minutes to, refute or talk about church finances in the court, along with David Nielsen. This could be one heck of a 60 Minutes.
Yeah, I see a post that was posted on Mormon Stories podcast from Paramount Press Express 60 Minutes listing for Sunday, May 14th. So I think it's
you did see that?
For sure happening. Yeah, I got it here if you want me to.
Oh no, that's okay. I believe you. I think that it is. I think it's pretty solid that that's what we got, and I'm sure everybody is going to be all ears for this thing. So we obviously we just can't wait for that to happen. Now our next article here is this is absolutely amazing here. Lori Vallow, she is back in the news. The prosecution for this case, they rested, and the defense, they only put up a couple of days worth of testimony. They really didn't even hardly call any witnesses. The defense basically here, she didn't take the stand. The defense just said, this is the so-called doomsday mom, the cult, Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow. They didn't even do anything. They didn't put on any defense whatsoever. The closing arguments, they've just been completed. And now the jury is now deliberating, and the verdict is going to be televised here. I want to give play this one quick clip here to sum it all up.
The trial of Lori Valde-Bell has come to an end after more than 5 weeks. Right now, we are waiting on the jury. Linda Larson has been at the Ada County Courthouse since early this morning. Linda, what can you tell us?
Todd, the fate of Lori Valde-Bell is now in the hands of the jury. They got the case at about 2:15 this afternoon, so they've had it for about 3 hours. Now, we just got word that they have ordered out for dinner, so it looks like they are going to continue later into the night to try and reach a verdict. Now, the day started with an emotional entrance by Kay and Larry Woodcock. They were playing JJ's favorite song.
Guys, today is the day. That song was JJ's song.
And that emotion really setting the day for the entire closing arguments today. And we are seeing some pretty interesting things out of the closing arguments. Now, I am joined right now by Rex Connor, and Rex is Lori's uncle, correct? Okay, so now tell me, first of all, what did you think coming into today, and what did you think of those closing arguments?
Well, I was here a couple of weeks ago for about 3 days of the trial, and wanted to come back for the closing arguments because the experience live, you just get more out of it. At least I do than I get out of highlights and listening to the various reports. Although I will say, if you don't mind me taking a quick side trip, I am very appreciative of the reports. I appreciate the media so much for carrying this story, because it's touched millions of people, because y'all are willing to stand out here and do what you do. So thank you very much. So back to the trial today and the closing arguments. I thought the defense did as well as they could, given that they had nothing, and they can't just get up there and say, I got nothing. So they did the best they could. The guilt of the parties involved, especially my niece Lori, didn't leave them much that they could defend.
So you feel like she is guilty then?
Well, the jury has to declare that, but I feel that she did what the prosecution said she did. I feel she and Chad and Alex and anyone else involved in it did what the prosecution said what they did.
You guys have been a pretty close family. How hard has this been for you and for your family to have to go through this?
Oh, it's so tough on the family, but that's no different than the rest of the people. Think of the millions of people that are involved in this now because they've heard the news and y'all have carried it so well, covered it so well. We're all suffering from this. I mean, this offends all of our senses, all of our sensibility. I don't think anyone's heard the story that isn't scarred by it. Who can imagine this much evil?
All right.
So I appreciate the question about the family, and yes, it's been tough on the family, but it's tough on everyone.
Yeah, that it is for sure. And of course, we are awaiting that verdict. We don't know when it will come in. There is a chance that it will come in tonight. We will be able to carry that live from the courtroom for the first time. So we will have that for you, and we will stay here and be awaiting that and have it for you as soon as we get it. Todd, back to you.
All right, Linda, thanks for the live update. Again, I want to reiterate that when the verdict does come in, we will plan to air that live here on our air, Local News 8.
What's your reaction here, Chris, to the Doomsday Mom?
Does that have death penalty riding on it? Do you know?
No, the death penalty has been taken off the table. This is the whole situation with this trial, which really makes it, it's still a good trial, but because there is no death penalty, because they took that off the table, that's why the defense, in my opinion, only went on the stand for 2 days. Her DNA is on the duct tape. Her DNA is on the shovel that was used to bury the children. There's just, you can't blame her. You can't blame her husband because they're dancing on the beach in Hawaii getting married. You can't say, well, he put me up to it. He was the mastermind and he was some kind of a tyrant. We have the text messages between them, which is planning it all out. This is first that she's up on 2 counts. It's deliberate. It's planned. There's DNA. There's just no defense to this situation with no death penalty. That's why the defense just said, well, the defense was the prosecution never proved their case. Therefore you can't convict. And that's all that we have. It's just not much of a defense, obviously. There's not much to say.
Yeah, if that had been there, it might have been reason for them to confess or admit guilt. But, I guess you take that off the table, there's no reason to even talk.
Yeah, there's just nothing. And it could be that the jury has been deliberating now for a couple of days. We'll release this on Sunday. I guess we could be upstaged by the fact that they might give us the comments, and that this news might not be as timely as it should be. But anyway, we just wanted to cover that. And also in the news this week, just briefly here, we have King Charles here. He has he's in the news. He's reigning here, and he's taken over. He's been the coronation took place. And I just found this tweet, which in my opinion kind of sums up my thoughts briefly on this. Is you have King Charles getting crowned here, and yeah, what century? This is from The Office. What century is this? It's hard to believe that we're still doing this kind of thing here in the modern day, in our modern day. Well, what do you think here?
I mean, I guess it's tradition. You got to use and put together all tradition. I mean, I guess some of the stuff we talk about is like if you leave a tradition or a religion, you lose things like ritual. There's a lot of thought in that world about how that helps unite and unify groups or unite people under certain ideas or concepts. And you just don't have something like that when you get out, deconstruct yourself out into the world of nothingness. Ritual does seem to hold nations together or whatever, and all the old imagery and all that stuff, but all of it seems weird to people nowadays.
Now, I love this tweet here, which has King Charles. He's been crowned. He's on the throne here, and he's holding a curious bowl of a brass workmanship. And all the Mormons are joking about this. They say, if you know, you know. It seems like he found Lehi in the desert in the world of the Jaredites. It seems like he found the brass ball, the so-called Leahona in the Book of Mormon, which I find to be very amusing. And you also found this tweet here, and I'm sorry I don't have it to pull up here, but Jacob Hansen weighed in on this coronation, and what were his thoughts there, Chris?
Yeah, they notice all the similarities too, and they find it interesting, or they're proud of it, or think that it definitely hints to all that stuff being from the same lineage or concepts of temple issues, or who knows, Masonic issues, which some people, ex-Mormons might look at that and say, wow, that's weird, that's creepy. Mormons are looking at it and saying, wow, that's weird, that's awesome.
Yeah, if you want to know our complete thoughts, back when if you want to know our complete thoughts, Mormon News Roundup, back in episode 24, we covered very, very thoroughly Queen Elizabeth's passing, and I actually was in England just a few months ago. The church released a statement about Queen Elizabeth's passing, and we dissected that in great depth back in episode 24. So if you want to hear some more thoughts on that, then go back to episode number 24. Now, also in the news here this week, this is a real surpriser here for me. Rachel Maddow, she is connecting Uganda's so-called Kill the Gays bill to Arizona Christians. So Uganda's parliament passed a law again today. This was published back on LGBTQ Nation, Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. It makes it a crime just to identify as being LGBTQ. And this anti-homosexuality law here for Uganda is one of the most restrictive in the entire world. And it will make aggravated homosexuality a capital crime. Okay, so and Rachel Maddow goes to great lengths here to connect this to Arizona, a bunch of Christians in Arizona. But what I don't think that Rachel Maddow really understands is, well, what does this have to do with Mormons? Well, the thing about it is that the mastermind behind this bill is Sharon Slater. And this is from LatterdaySaintMag.com. Sharon Slater is the co-founder and current president of Family Watch International, a nonprofit organization in consultative status with the United Nations. So, and guess what, Chris? She is an active Latter-day Saints. So what I'm trying to pin all this together is the fact that the most restrictive anti-gay bill in the entire world is not only linked to Arizona's Christians, but the mastermind behind it is a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Well, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, it's a little difficult to research because you look it up and most of the stuff talking about it has its certain angle, but for the large part, it seems to be true. I know when stuff came up recently in Florida where they had that Don't Say Gay bill, the way the activists would frame it was a little bit hyperbolic for what the thing actually said. So I was actually trying to find what the actual detail of it was, and I found some apologetics from that SEMPA person who supposedly connected it up with her. But then I looked at like some of the larger concepts of different African nations and how many of them have that draconian of a law, and it's almost half of them. It's one of the points we've brought up a lot over the years, is that there are certain issues in the world, and maybe the Western world isn't part of the problem, but if we're helping going and writing the bills, that's not any good. But it was really hard to find the actual language of the bill. I know they delayed it. Some people say they delayed it because they're going to make it even more draconian. Other people say they delayed it because they got pressured off of it from LGBTQ activists. It's really hard to say, but if it's as bad as they paint it to be, that ain't good. We're definitely not for that. We're definitely on the level of adults should be free and have all the rights that all other adults have to live whatever lives they see viable or fit.
Yeah, the Prime Minister of Uganda is Martin Sempa, and his wife is Janet Museveni. And you found this tweet here by Janet Museveni, which includes, Miss, what are we seeing with this tweet here? What did you uncover here, Chris?
Yeah, it was that, yeah, she really did bring in Janet and consult with Janet and gives credit to Janet. So it's not just Rachel making that up. I mean, she directly talks about her specifically.
Yeah, and she's in LatterdaySaintMag.com. Look, you're not in LatterdaySaintMag.com, period, if you're not a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's no way that they're going to put somebody who's an ex-Mormon or not a Mormon in that magazine. That magazine's entire focus is for members. So the fact that we have one of the most restrictive and really, I don't know, it's really a barbaric law that even if, according to Rachel Maddow, even if you identify as being gay, you could potentially be put to death. That is absolutely incredible. And the fact that there is a member of the church who's the mastermind behind that, that is surprising. See, if you think about what Elder Oaks has said and what the church has recently supported the Marriage for All Act, I mean, the whole idea behind the Marriage for All Act says that let us do our religious thing over here. We want to be able to discriminate against gays, but in the public sphere, LGBTQ persons, they should have rights. They shouldn't be discriminated against in housing and employment and things like that. But privately, we want to be able to discriminate. That's the difference in this law, is it says even in the public sphere that gay persons are to basically have no rights. It's a real... people say that MNRU Jokes is extremely right-wing on this. This is taking this to a level that is something that I've never seen before. Any last thoughts on this?
Just, yeah, I mean, mentioning or saying that you're gay being a cause for death, that might be more extreme than other nations, but there's a lot of other nations in the world that have just as draconian laws. And I do appreciate when activism attacks where... Some of the problems that or criticisms we have with activism is that it just continues and continues and continues in places where things aren't as bad as they are in other areas. But when they go and attack the areas where they really are bad, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Our next article here is a mommy blogger from Utah here. Mommy blogger from Utah, Heather Armstrong. She battled with depression and alcoholism. She lost her life. She died by suicide. She was the shoulder for many moms to lean on, and she was a best-selling author. She was considered the OG influencer. I just want to play this quick clip here, which goes over her life.
She was a shoulder for many moms to lean on. Salt Lake City blogger and New York Times best-selling author Heather Armstrong, known as the original mommy blogger, died by suicide.
For more than 20 years, she shared the very raw truth about her struggles as a mom, her battle with depression, most recently alcoholism, and millions listened in. And while we don't always report suicides, Heather made her personal battles very public on her blog, deuce.com.
She shared all of her personal stories with witty and biting comments sometimes. And also, people are familiar with a lot of these beautiful photos. She shared those struggles about her mental health with me in recent years when we sat down. Wendy Halloran is here with her story tonight.
Well, Heidi, well, some found her controversial. Her followers appreciated her honesty. One of her followers summed it up by tweeting, "You wanted to help people, and you did." We are sharing her story to show that there is help out there.
I knew that I was in a depression, the worst of my life.
That was Heather Armstrong in 2019, sharing her story with Heidi after taking part in a cutting-edge trial where doctors flatlined her brain and brought her back to life 10 times.
Once we realize that this is a chronic health issue, like any other chronic health issue, hopefully we will be less afraid to ask for help.
She launched Deuce in 2001. She blogged about her children, carpooling, breastfeeding. Nothing seemed off limits, including her struggles with sobriety and depression.
And I hope women, especially in Utah, understand that you can both love your children and struggle with motherhood.
Jen Oxborough is a licensed clinical social worker.
That you can accomplish a lot in recovery and still struggle with addiction.
Tweets from her followers. She was so honest about her life, especially about being Mormon and her decision to no longer be a Mormon. Another saying, "When I started out, all you wanted to be was her." She had the best blog. It was honest. It was community. This is very sad.
This could be a very scary situation for people who identify with these risk factors and feel like they've lost someone who was a bit of a rudder for them. I think something that people can do to honor her is to know what the resources are, know how to recognize the risks, and know how to engage when somebody that you care about is having a hard time, or if you're having a hard time yourself.
Jen Oxborough also says it's important to promote safety. For example, securely storing items that can be used for self-harm. She believes this is where the best potential is to prevent suicide.
Any thoughts on that? It's a tragic situation. Any thoughts on that?
I read what seemed to be her final post on her blog, and she talked a lot about trying to get over and how difficult it was getting over alcohol and that sort of thing. One of the deals that we talk about a little bit, and if you've seen my channel at all a little bit, the guys on there drink. They'll sometimes drink while we're talking. I'm not a drinker. I'm not big into it, but we talk frequently about how there is some sort of leaning in the ex-Mormon world of saying, hey, you're free now, let's go do all the things. And that's one of the things that we will harp on or point out or criticize, of saying like, no, maybe slow your roll on a lot of these different things, because they, especially if you're already prone to depression and that sort of stuff, getting started on that is there's a lot of ideas that you got from your Mormon upbringing that maybe you should hold on to, because they were pretty good concepts or ideas. And it's not to demonize or put down anybody who goes and gets into those things, but there's wisdom in avoiding some of that stuff. And boy, it sounded like she had a rough time quitting it, which I hope. It seems like it exacerbated it, according to her last post, and it just can't help if you're already feeling depressed. And that's the only thing that I can think about with it, is like leading into the kinds of concepts that we get into of saying, just because you're ex-Mormon now doesn't mean it's free to go try all the substances. Like maybe hold off on that stuff because they're dangerous. They really were always as dangerous as everybody was saying. And that's, I'm sure, well, she even said in her blogs that she wished she didn't have that thing on top of everything else that she had, of having to fight with getting over an addiction to alcohol. And I feel so bad for her, because like, getting over that stuff is, I'm more than positive that she was feeling as bad as you could imagine in that time frame. And I feel terrible to go through that.
Very, very troubling. My own father battled alcoholism for many years and depression as well. So I'm well acquainted with these type of situations. And, he left the church for a period of time. My heart goes out to her. She was a BYU. She was a member of the church for many years. She was a BYU graduate. She eventually talked about how she left the church, lost her faith. And then, unfortunately, she had to battle a lot of internal demons. She was not able to overcome those. So, obviously, if anyone out there is also feeling any of those type of things, there is help. There's the National Suicide Line, and you can also drop us an email. We can find some help for you if you're facing those challenges. And speaking also of facing additional challenges with leaving the church, David Archuleta's mom just this week as well. David Archuleta's mom here, she's on the right here. She has given a post here where she's talked about how she has basically come out and says that she's not going to be a member of the church anymore. Basically, she invited David, her son, famous son who got famous for being on American Idol, to come to sacrament meeting. He came a few times, but then he stopped because he said that it, quote, it hurt too much to be there, Mom, end quote. For some reason, I couldn't understand why he was saying that. But then it hit me how the LGBTQ has been really not welcome in this church. Quote, we love you, but you're not welcome to participate in all of the blessings because of who you are, end quote. Some talks have been really hurtful towards him, and I didn't get it then because I was so committed to stay and obey. I cried many nights at bedtime, and my husband is a witness to this because I was feeling so much pain to see my child suffer so much. I sat in church and sacrament meeting one day and looked around and said to myself, God is not here, end quote. So how can a loving God be so exclusive? I did not teach my children their whole lives to serve and love God, who is not accepting of them, because God is love. So by November 20th, 2022, I wrote a letter to my bishop and told him that I was stepping away from the church. And by March 2023, I decided to give up my membership completely after finding out the true story of Joseph Smith and many other things that I won't go on to for future details, end quote. So November, she said that that's when she really made her decision. And that's also coincides really with the time frame when David Archuleta said that he was also stepping back from the church. So it seems like they both stepped back from the church at about the same time. And now just a couple of days ago, she mentioned that she has formally had her membership withdrawn. Any reaction on this?
Well, speaking for most of us guys, I mean, we think that's the proper action, is if it's hurting you and if it's harmful to you, step away. We can get critical of people who think that it's up to them to then go and try to change that organization that's going to always be on the level of promoting pronomian behavior, and their theology is based in it. If they're going to change it, it's got to change. They can continue to take this stuff into account and all that sorts of deal. But we think that the proper action for people who are feel it's causing harm to their lives and what they're doing, the concept that they think is so bad, is to just step away from it. I think it's the right action if that's what she's feeling.
Yeah. It's a lot of tragedy in the news this week. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what that's like to have a child who is feeling that way. It's difficult for me to put myself into her shoes. So my heart definitely goes out to her. And I hope that whatever she decides for herself and her family, I hope that it works out for her. Now, another article here that caught my eye here is a tweet here by Quentin L. Cook, one of the apostles for the church here. The church maintains 17 official Twitter accounts. This is one of them. The Quorum of the 15 plus, I think the Book of Mormon and the church itself has an official account. This is a very interesting tweet here that caught my eye. It's here. Here is Quentin L. Cook tweeting. The Book of Mormon is internally consistent, beautifully written, and contains the answers to life's questions. It is another testament of Jesus Christ that contains his commandments and gospel teachings. Continuously reading and studying this sublime book has strengthened my desire to live God's commandments and has provided me with a strong testimony of the living reality of the Son of God. And there he is in presumably what I can imagine is his church office. He's holding a well-worn copy of the Book of Mormon there. And I find this to be very interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, when I was growing up here, Chris, it used to be that the Book of Mormon was basically perfect. It was the most correct of any book on earth. A man would get nearer to God by abiding by its precepts than any other book. It was the keystone of the religion. It was a true history of an ancient people, and it was basically the creme de la creme. It was basically where you go for all of life's answers. We seem to be, from this tweet, we seem to be retreating from some of those more miraculous claims of the Book of Mormon to now we get, well, the Book of Mormon, it helps me grow closer to God, and the Book of Mormon is internally consistent. This seems to be taking the Book of Mormon down off of its incredibly high pedestal and bringing it more down to a more pedestrian book. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems to be the angle lately. I told you just this week I was watching Mormonism with the Murph, and he had on Daniel C. Peterson, which is one of the apologists that I read years ago when I was struggling and leaving the church. And I remember him defending things. Well, he probably still does, but it did seem to be that talking about the consistency within the book was the big angle. I don't know if they coordinate pushing like that same angle right now. Stuff always moves towards pragmatics if you look at any sort of religion as it ages, and we'll even accept and look at some of the concepts and ideas of pragmatics and religion, and I mean I'll accept them. I especially understand them from like an evolutionary psychology standpoint and that sorts of deal. But these are the truth claims. These are the types of truth claims that Mormons, ex-Mormons still cover them. They still get into them. And then there's other ex-Mormons who are now more on the moralistic timeline who think it's now gauche to cover them. Whenever these sorts of things are covered, I always find it interesting and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, too, it's been a long time since I've cared to keep them all memorized.
Yeah, honestly, that's a good point. And it's on my to-do list. We had Mormonism with the Murph on this program a few months ago, so I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of him. Now, when it comes to, let's just briefly talk about that particular claim about the Book of Mormon being internally consistent. Now, this graphic here, I got it off of Brian Hale's website here, and he talks about the Book of Mormon and its composition here, and he also analyzes whether the Book of Mormon is indeed internally consistent. Again, this is from I would call him one of the biggest apologists of our day, and the literary characteristics of the Book of Mormon. It has a word count of 270,000 words. It has 7,000 sentences. The average sentence length is 40 words. The reading level is 8th grade. The dialect is early modern English, say 1400. There's no punctuation. There's about 6,000 unique words. There's college level vocabulary words, about a couple dozen of them. Proper nouns, 170. Distinct name titles for God, over 100. Now, here is the internal consistency aspect that Brian Hales brings out. Let's see if he thinks the Book of Mormon is internally consistent. He says that there are named characters about 207, and they're mentioned about 4,000 times with 2 mistakes. There are 2 mistakes when it comes to named characters, because a named character in the Book of Mosiah comes back to life when he had already been dead. So that has been fixed in our modern day Book of Mormon. That's 2 mistakes. Socio-geographic groups, there's 45. And that's very, very strong. There's no mistakes there. In chronological systems, we have the reign of the king of the judges. We have after they left Jerusalem, and then we also have the birth of Christ. Those are the 3 time systems in the Book of Mormon. According to Brian Hales, that is with there's only 1 mistake. So there's 180 chronological mentions with 1 mistake. That's pretty good, I suppose. And geographic locations, 149 mentions 670 times with 2 mistakes. So there are, even Brian Hales acknowledges that the internal consistency of the Book of Mormon contains according to him, at least 5 mistakes. And according to Mormon Think, you could probably scrape out, if you really strain at it, you could probably scrape out a couple more. But you're talking about thousands upon thousands of people's names, time systems, and things like that, with only, say, less than 10 mistakes. So I would say that means that the Book of Mormon, for me, is mostly internally consistent. It's not, even Brian Hales acknowledges that there's not perfect consistency inside of the Book of Mormon.
So just this week, I keep up with the Midnight Mormons. They've been talking about archaeological proofs in the Jerusalem side of some of that stuff. I'm actually familiar with some of the people who write those books. They kept repeating the concept that their main goal was to show you that you don't have to accept people calling you stupid for believing that it's real. And myself, you know, from my charitable standpoint, like I'll accept that. Like I accept that their main goal is just people like my nephew who are out there preaching about it. I don't think he's at all a dummy for believing in it. And I do grant that sort of thing. It's those sorts of arguments and those sorts of things aren't convincing to me, but I don't think people are terribly stupid who do, or I don't go down that route generally as an ex-Mormon, but the pragmatics of the book and the people and the friendships and families and all that stuff that build around it, I understand the arguments from the world that all works. And if it works, it works. But if they need to hold a true belief of it being hard scientific, historical fact, which they're even backing off all of that, saying it specifically, but I don't have a problem. I really don't have a problem if people use that sort of stuff, unless they're trying to force me to also agree with it because it's an absolute proof.
Yeah, I tried to watch those Midnight Mormons archaeological episodes. I could only make my way through about half of them. I didn't gain that much from them, or I would have watched them all to the end. So the thing about it is that you know, you can say the Book of Mormon is mostly internally consistent, but you know, the thing about it is the Lord of the Rings is internally consistent too, and so is the Iliad, so is the Odyssey. Hey, so is L. Ron Hubbard's Dianetics. You know, internal consistency. Just because a book is internally consistent doesn't mean that that's a book that I want to, I don't know, base my entire life construct around. You know, and when it comes to also, you know, this kind of reminds me of what David Bednar said, that the Book of Mormon, during a devotional, Elder Bednar encouraged attendees to study the Book of Mormon and learn how it applies to our lives. And he said, quote, "The Book of Mormon is not a book of history," end quote. So we have him admitting that it's not really a book of history. And also we have President Nelson himself talking about the Book of Mormon and whether it is a book of history. I want to play this quick TikTok here for you that I found that talks about President Nelson, and does he think that the Book of Mormon is historical?
Not even President Nelson believes the Book of Mormon is historical, and that's just not true. It's a misrepresentation of what the prophet's been saying for quite a long time now. In 2021, 2016, and many other times, he said that the Book of Mormon is not a history textbook, and that's true, but that is not rejecting the book's historicity. The Book of Mormon is not a comprehensive, objective historiographic survey of ancient America. It is an ancient spiritual record, which has history within its pages. He literally did say that, but its purpose isn't to dispassionately convey history in the modern sense. Its purpose is to use the ancient, true story of the Nephites and Lamanites to convince the world that Jesus is the Christ.
I mean, we're trying to make a delineation here between the Book of Mormon being a book, a historical book, with it being, there seems to be some history in the Book of Mormon, but not all history. It's kind of a fine line that we're trying to walk here. And if you watch that you pointed to me to the Midnight Mormons archaeological stuff. They spent the entire time on their archaeological proofs of the Book of Mormon in the Old World. Because obviously we know from Michael Coe and others that there's absolutely no archaeological foundation of the Book of Mormon in the New World, which is why they didn't want to talk about it at all. Any last thoughts on this entire Book of Mormon internally consistent archaeological stuff here, Chris?
Well, there's a lot of people get into it. I think even Quick is starting to do tours to do archaeological searches. You know, all the Heartland people are doing that stuff. To me, I think if you listen to Bednar and Nielsen, all that stuff, I think they're kind of hitting it that's not the road to bark down.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do very much for me. But the truth of it is, I'm perfectly fine. Kevin on my channel, he believes it all happened as said and is real, just like that. There's other people who kind of get into symbolism and the symbolic worldview, and we'll talk about that sort of stuff. And maybe everything was just symbolic if it was a real thing at all. In my brain, I've openly admitted since I was young, I never got like a real big, strong, huge belief system or testimony on all of it, even though I tried. In my brain, it was all just always cartoons and I couldn't take it out of cartoons in my imagination. And I hear that stuff, and I don't get angry at it until somebody's barking at me. But it's been a long time since people have acted that way, because I think they've had to retreat to more and more positions of oh, it's possibly this, rather than barking like it's for sure this.
Right.
But I think that's probably a better position to be in.
Yeah, and that's what, in my opinion, that's what Quentin Cook and others, and Bednar and President Nelson, they're all signaling here that it's not a book of history, and that it's internally consistent, and that if you just live the principles, you get closer to God. And that seems to be retreating in the same type of mindset that the community of Christ retreated to many, many years ago. So hey, our next article here is Sherry Dew. She's made it back in the news here. This is from the Daily Universe, which is BYU's own newspaper. This was published on May 5th, 2023. Sherry L. Dew invites BYU Women's Conference participants to live celestially in a celestial world. So the BYU Women's Conference, they get together every summer. I guess it's every spring. And it's been called off for the last couple of years because of COVID, but it is back in force. And of course, Sherry Dew, I believe she's the CEO of Deseret Book, and she was the former first counselor and the Relief Society president, I want to say. And she made a couple of what, in my opinion, are surprising admissions in this particular article, which is covered by the Daily Universe. She shared an experience that she had after attending the temple for the first time in her young adulthood. So, Sherry Dew, she has never been married, so she went to the temple presumably a little bit later than most people would. So she's a little older, and she said this particular quote, which I kind of found remarkable that they actually printed this in the Daily Universe. And she said, quote, "Candidly, I didn't love the experience," end quote. Why I'm shocked by that admission here in the Daily Universe. Am I taking things too far, or have you ever seen a senior church leader come out and say that everything was not 100% wonderful? You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much
Not at
into this.
that level. No, I mean, there's more and more stuff where people are more willing to admit their doubts, when it used to be that you had to just announce that you were just there all the way through. And I think it's more powerful stories that if people had doubts and got past doubts. But up at that level that you're talking about, we all know that most of the time through history, it was about showing that you were there and with it all the way through and with it, which I don't know why that had to become some sort of a narrative to be up at that level. Because I think it would be interesting if a lot of them talked about how they went through journeys of leaving or doubt or that sort of deal. But now, maybe that's the future of this stuff. I don't know.
But the other admission that she made in this talk here that I want to go over, she talks about people who Sherry Dew, Sister Dew. She also said that prophets, they're not perfect. But however, she made this incredible statement here. She said prophets, they're not perfect. However, prophets, seers, and revelators are not perfect. Then why should we trust them maybe more than anyone else? And end quote. That is the golden question for me about the church's proposition, or the church's value-added proposition. If prophets, seers, and revelators are not perfect, then why should we trust them more than anyone else? So she answers her own question here, and I find her answer to be very remarkable. She said, quote, "Because they are the most infallible leaders on earth," end quote. Okay, they're not perfect, but they're the most infallible. Okay, most infallible. I'm sorry. I don't are there degrees of infallibility? Because I looked this up in the dictionary here, Chris. According to the dictionary that I looked it up, infallible means not allowing the possibility of error or mistake. So how can you be mostly infallible? I mean, it's kind of like the Princess Bride. You're mostly dead. There's a big difference between being all dead and that's the joke. Either you're infallible or you're not. Can a person be mostly infallible? I don't understand, Sherry. What do you think?
I suppose it's when that old prophet or person light gets toggled on or off, which is infinitely vague. So.
I don't understand. You want to say that the church leaders they make mistakes. That's fine. I can understand that. If you want to say that they're not perfect, I can get behind that. I don't understand saying that they're kind of infallible. They're somewhat infallible. They're occasionally infallible. They're once in a while infallible. None of those things make sense, along with mostly infallible. You're either infallible or you're not. I don't see a delineation in between the two. And by the way, if you buy a wristwatch and it's only gives you the correct time, say, I don't know, 70% of the time, is that a wristwatch that you would want to be a part of, that you would want to buy? I'm looking for a wristwatch that is always going to tell us the truth. And that's the difference. President Nelson said in a young adult gathering, he said that he will always preach the truth. And then President Elder Ballard has said the same thing. They will never lead you astray. They're always going to teach you the truth. And Wilford Woodruff, if the Lord would not permit me or any member who holds this office to lead the church astray. So we're seeing something different. The leaders of the church, they say, hey, no, we got it right, and we can never lead you astray. We will always teach you the truth, and we're infallible. And now we have Sherry Dew saying, well, they're kind of mostly infallible. They're, hey, wink, wink, nod, nod. They're mostly infallible, but they're still pretty good. They're the best we got. I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, well, there's some levels of that where I've talked about before that I feel like people who maybe used to be people you disagreed with or your enemies, I'd even offer this towards the wokish people or whatever, is that you got to give them off ramps. And one of the off ramps that you can give people, there's a fine line between gaslighting and off ramps, and that's that. Well, we never used to say that, and well, no, okay, now we're saying it, or we're changing it up now, but this is how we always talk. But there's some sort of level of if they're going to be discussing nowadays, like I see in all these pro believing internet spaces, if prophets are infallible or fallible or not, and they're open to talk about it now, to me that's a win. And like, I'll give you that off ramp, because some of us know that like 20, 30 years ago that you'd get barked at pretty hard if you dared say anything different. But now you see very, very believing people openly and freely discussing it, and I think that's a good thing.
So it's just they're signaling for the liberals or the progressive Mormons that, hey, you don't have to be as dogmatic, and she's giving you that. I like what you call that, a little off ramp, so that you don't have to be quite. I don't know. You're supposed to be in the good ship Zion, and maybe she's also allowing you to be on a jet ski over to the side. You're you're still.
We all, if we're gonna come back together at all, we all need off ramps for some of the things that we held to a little bit too tightly.
Yeah. Yeah, our next article here is, this is an opinion piece that came out of the Deseret News here. Opinion, are young Latter-day Saints leaning more liberal? This was published on May 5th, 2023. Donald Trump alienated many Latter-day Saints, but these roaming voters won't necessarily flock to Democrats. And they went over the results of the last presidential race. And it talked about how independent presidential candidate Evan McMullen garnered 21% of Utahns voting in 2016, because many in the state could not stomach the nastiness exhibited by the Republican nominee Donald Trump, and were also unhappy with Hillary Clinton's harsh characterization of her detractors. Conversely, Governor Spencer Cox fits the profile of what these millennial and Generation Z citizens want from their politicians, which bodes well for his future. While data from various sources illustrates this trend, it does not guarantee automatic gains for Democrats. The left will need to adjust messaging to capture these roaming voters. So it seems to me from this article and from what I've been researching a little bit of it, that yes, Latter-day Saints, they're definitely leaning more liberal, but that doesn't mean that they're going to the Democratic Party. Instead, they're going independent to people like Evan McMullen and others. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think some of our guys even voted McMullen, even though they'll claim to be more libertarian or conservative leaning. But this is one of the theoretical concepts that I get into a whole lot, which I won't delve into here. But the concept is Cthulhu always swims left. Ben Shapiro is way more liberal than whoever his same version was 100 years ago. There's a certain type of entropy that society goes that way. Dan McClellan even talked about it, if you listen to him on RFM, that there's a way religions go. They go from orthodox to more liberal, and it's something Oswald Spengler, if you read his book about decline of the West or something like that, he goes over many different civilizations that went down that same route. And some people on more reactionary thinking sides think that that's a form of entropy, not progress, that it's leading towards something that's going to end up falling apart. Like maybe if you look at San Francisco or something like that. If that's true or not true, it's a concept that I wish, a lot of good thinkers who just seem to get stuck into one side of thinking would open up their minds to and start thinking about more. Everything's going to go more liberal or more left until it hits a breaking point, and then you run into reactionaries or the types of reactionaries that might be some of your problem. And that's part of our warning is you can bring about reactions that are worse than what we are. Our reaction is libertarian, but there are worse conservative reactions in the world.
Yeah, the other quote that I want to share from this article is here. This is from the opinion page on the Deseret News, and the opinion page on the Deseret News, they don't hold back. And they I just want to read this one quote. It says, "I don't blame young people for recoiling at Trump. As a human being, he's quite disgusting. Even if you like his politics, he's everything good parents teach their children not to be." The Deseret News has no problem whatsoever slamming Donald Trump in the opinion pages time and time again. They will throw him repeatedly under the bus in a way that they throw no other. They will not do that.
That's our point.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's a terrible, horrible, narcissistic, gross person. But have you met politicians? Like show me the one that isn't that way. And that's one of our points. We had a whole podcast where we went through a lot of the different sins of Biden. And the point wasn't that Donald Trump's great. Go for Donald Trump. It's like, hey, what are you looking at here? Like this has been that way through history. Victor Davis Hanson wrote a book, The Case for Trump. I really like him. I'm not like a Trump guy, but I am somebody who looks at the rest of that political muck, what we might call the cathedral, and say, who's the person who's supposedly better? Like Victor Davis Hanson's book, he goes over some of the more disgusting things all the different presidents did through history. And the point is the relativism of suddenly just noticing Donald Trump because he's just so blatant about it. And there's some sort of level to me, like there's this dark triad thing of Machiavellians, narcissists, and sociopaths. And Trump's obviously is a type of a malignant narcissist, but you got to watch for Machiavellians too. And Machiavellians are the guys who don't wear it on their sleeves.
The next article here is, who is the biggest threat to the church? Now, this was published by your guy here, Thoughtful Faith here, and we've invited the so-called Thoughtful Saint on this podcast. I have yet to hear back from him.
Jacob, I'll tell him. He'll come on for you.
That'll be good. Now, he is doing a discussion with Bill Reel this week, which I am greatly looking forward to. Can't wait to, they're going to be talking about morality here. And I'm going to be very interested to see what becomes of that, because those are two, that's kind of like the immovable figure, the immovable object is going to meet the irresistible force. That's going to be a clash of the titans. But he put out an interesting poll here, which I thought was kind of interesting here. And I just want to get your thoughts on it. And he said, he put out a poll. He said, who is the biggest threat to the church? Is it progressive Mormons? Is it ex-Mormons? Is it Desnat? Or is it evangelicals? This had quite a few respondents here. And most of the people who follow him said that the biggest threat to the church is progressive Mormons. And I just really kind of got me thinking here. I thought, the thing about the church is the members. If you don't have members, you don't have a church. So how can the threat to the church be the members itself? That's what the paradigm here is that I don't understand. A threat to the church could be, I don't know, some outside force, but the members, how can the members threaten its own institution? The members are the church.
Well, there's a lot of thought into this. If somebody wants to see a very detailed debate on the subject, there was just one last night the Distributist had on somebody. That's somebody that we follow in these spaces that are called reactionary thinkers. But they talk a lot about the concept that I already brought up, that there's pronomian and antinomian behavior, and stuff's going to push towards antinomian behavior. And inside of the groups, there's always this push to liberalize and get more loosey-goosey with the rules. And one of the things that they point at with it is that it's a form of entropy. Like there's two different types of entropy. One's fire, stuff blows up because you got some sort of a nut blowing things up. The other one is a rust. And that rust that happens to something, they'll look and pull up numbers. What really happens with that across organizations is not just organizations, civilizations, and whatever, is that sort of rust leads towards decay and decline of the organizations. And one of the things they can point out are things like birth rates or attendance rates. And they have empirical data for this argument. And it's an argument that people on the progressive side should face. They should face up to. Maybe they have answers for it, but they've been in a world of plugging their ears and just saying la, 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 la to it. They should face it that there is a decline in an entropy to stuff that moves towards just complete loosey-goosiness. And they're not necessarily wrong about that. And then there's everything's a yin yang, because they could have the other entropy of holding so tightly to their tradition that they become stale and they become like dead wood that breaks really easy. And we're all we've all constantly been living in that world of how the heck do we dance between this. And there's been a bit of a level of the past 20 years that they're not wrong that it's been one side that's been getting all the wins and victories, and some of the conservatism, what we say, I wanted to call my channel from the start of Chesterton's fence. And what that is, G.K. Chesterton said there's a fence. If you come across a fence in the wilderness, don't rip out that fence until you know why that fence was there. And that whole concept is, it doesn't mean you can't rip down that fence or be careful with this fence or that fence or whatever. It's just know why it's there. Figure out why it's there. And there's a lot of concepts through evolutionary psychology or ideas or history and civilizational things, the things I've been talking about, that it's not just one fence. There's a lot of different fences that got put up maybe pragmatically through our traditional religions. And just because we decided, we figured out it's not true, that doesn't mean that we now have all the galaxy brain answers that we could just throw the stuff off, drink all the alcohol, all become polyamorous, and that our society doesn't just collapse down into nothing. That they're not wrong that there's threat of just suddenly dropping everything, but then it's also, you can't just be old and stale and traditional that you can't get past stuff. But that's why I think it takes a lot of wisdom, and it takes a lot of ideas, and the whole concept of deconstruction, all that stuff, I think people need to be much more careful with it, although I'm critical of what that is too, because what deconstruction is in postmodernism has nothing to do with the way ex-Mormons use the word. But I don't know. I'm ranting. I'm sorry.
Well, it just does this. The biggest threat to the church is, it kind of is a callback to me of Boyd K. Packer. Remember, he had the 3 great dangers to the church, and it was homosexuals, intellectuals, and feminists. And once again, when it comes to church leadership and people who are really towing the line, it seems like the internal members seem to be the threat to the organization. And that to me is surprising, because you wouldn't say that the threat, in my opinion, the threat to the United States is United States citizens themselves, because we are the United States. We are, I'm a member of record. I still am a member of record. And, I think that we need to be a lot more inclusive instead of trying to point fingers like Boyd K. Packer does, or point fingers at progressive Mormons or liberals or conservatives or Trump supporters or DesNat. I think there's a lot of pointing fingers that goes on, and I don't think that it really leads to anything. It's trying to put people in boxes, put people in labels, and I just don't see a lot of benefit in trying to be on an intellectual high horse or an ethical high horse and telling people that how to think, how to behave, how to act. And if you're not doing it my way, the orthodox way, then you're a threat to the organization. I don't think that that's the right approach. Any last thoughts on this?
Sure. There's a yin yang in that, which also happens with the Ugandan thing with all the sorts of levels, is that the other side that starts getting accepted also starts becoming finger pointy, and also starts becoming the one saying you need to do it this way, move it this way, and move it that way. And the concept is that it all is threading a needle. It's all threading a needle, and I think all of our institutions, traditions, everything is much more fragile than we give credit for. And I think you just need everything reeled in, which is both your hard orthodoxy and your extreme, just run off the edge of a cliff, tear down all the laws type stuff. And I think both sides need each other, and they need each other in a way that's real. And that's true both ways, because almost anytime you see that somebody says that, they're really actually meaning, no, the other side needs to stop it. And no, they really do both need each other.
Absolutely. Now, next article is another tragic article here. This really made the national press here. Mormon mom accused of poisoning husband with fentanyl-laced Moscow Mule is seen promoting her kid's bereavement book a month before she was arrested for his murder. He told friends if anything happened to him, it would be his wife. She's charged with murdering her husband, Eric, in Utah last year. He died of a fentanyl overdose after she gave him a drink at their home. And the police say he feared that she was going to kill him because she had tried to do so previously. So I found this TikTok here, which sums up the entire thing to bring everybody up to speed about Corey Richards.
Here, Corey Richards has been selling herself as a grieving widow for the last year. Corey has been going around doing interviews and selling her children's books she wrote for her sons, 3 boys she had with Eric Richards. You can see up there in the clouds, that's Eric. She wrote this book for her sons after her husband died suddenly. She said she couldn't find anything for her boys to connect to, so she wrote this book, and she was selling it on Amazon. This is her husband, Eric Richards. In 2022, Eric was found with 5 times the lethal amount of fentanyl in his system. And it sounds like initially it was chalked up that his death was just another casualty in the fentanyl epidemic in America. But it sounds like there were some warning signs and problems in this marriage, starting with possibly the couple's trip to Greece. On this trip, Eric claims that he got very sick after eating with his wife, and he said to a family member he thought it was possible that his wife had poisoned him. But it seems like he put this out of his mind, because at some point this couple had debated purchasing this home for $2-something million. And Eric decided that he thought it was just a waste of money and he didn't want to buy it. And it seems like his wife was pretty set on it, though, because she took it upon herself to go into his work life insurance policy and change it so that she would now be the sole beneficiary for this work insurance policy that he shared with his partner. But he and his partner get a notification of this change, and it seems like it kind of spooked them, right? Let's fast forward to February of 2022. His beautiful wife makes him a Valentine's Day dinner. He eats the dinner and he gets very, very sick. He injects himself with an EpiPen. He takes some Benadryl and he survives this dinner, but not for long, because in March of 2022, she makes him a Moscow Mule before bed, and Eric drinks it. She claims that her child woke up with a nightmare and she went and climbed into bed with her child. And it wasn't until about 3 a.m. she said she went back into her bed where she finds her husband cold. She claims that she did CPR, that she called 911, but it sounds like the paramedics and other people noticed that she did not have any of this foam that Eric had by his mouth. And they found that to be weird. What also seems to be weird is she said that she left her phone on the bedside table when she went to check on her child, but it seems like somebody was text messaging on her phone and then erasing these text messages. The messages were between an unnamed acquaintance. What do you think that means? So her husband dies, and the very next day, she signs on that property that she wanted. And she, according to the police, she has a party and she is celebrating the purchase of his home. I don't know what else was going on. It sounds very weird. It sounds like all of that was happening until Eric's sister shows up and lets her know that Eric had taken a precautionary measure of switching his wife, Corey, off of his will and replacing it with his sister, just in case that those dinners that were making him sick was something else. So Corey gets really mad and there is an altercation. And it sounds like after that, things got weird between him and his family. And they eventually found out that she had actually bought, on 2 separate occasions, drugs, fentanyl, that she had allegedly mixed in with his Valentine's Day dinner and allegedly his Moscow mule. And she is now sitting in a jail cell waiting her court date.
No, we've seen a lot of these cases, unfortunately, that were men killing their wives. This is one of the first one that I've seen that has the wife killing the husband.
Yeah, poor guy. He went to the mission where I went to mission, Mexico City, right around the same time too. But I
Really?
didn't know him. Yeah.
But you didn't know him?
No. Well,
Wow.
there's 3 missions. It didn't say which one he was at, but
yeah, it's a massive city. It's got like 20 million people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so. Yeah, and I mean, this is taking sickness to a new level because she wrote a book about how to deal with bereavement after she allegedly, I guess allegedly, you have to put that in there, allegedly killed her husband. That is taking sickness to the next level. That, I mean, that's really, really sick.
When I first heard the story, I imagined that it was like a sudden surprise to everybody. They didn't know, but then you heard more detail, and their family seems to know from the get-go. And I wonder what they thought about that book, because she was parading around and being paraded around on Good Things Utah and all that stuff when they already good and knew, or allegedly knew, some of her shady stuff.
Yeah, and so she puts together a Facebook tribute for her husband with the, I'll see you in heaven and the angels are looking down and, the tear-jerking stuff here on Facebook. She puts this together as a tribute after allegedly multiple times trying to kill him and then ultimately finding success by giving him a massive dose of fentanyl. They have the text messages between her and the drug dealer where she says, I need the Michael Jackson stuff. I need the stuff that, because he is too resilient, he keeps surviving, I need some really, really harsh stuff that is going to be able to take him out. And then she eventually is able to succeed in this, puts together a book that talks about it, as Facebook tribute videos, buys the dream home that she always wanted to buy. I mean, this is just taking sickness to the next level. And if you look at his obituary here, Eric Richens, it does say in his obituary that he is a returned missionary, as you mentioned here, that he has 3 children, that he had a wife of 9 years, and that he went to the Mexico City mission. He was an avid outdoorsman. He was a serious athlete. He was fun. He was a very successful businessman. He ran a masonry company, and he was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when he got a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah. He had a successful business. He loved life. He, it's just absolutely, he seemed like a really good guy from this obituary. And this thing is just absolutely, I cannot believe what I've seen. This is just diabolicalness taken to the next level. I don't know. This has just really got me. I guess maybe it's because I'm a man. Let's just put that out there. Okay. Maybe it's because a lot of these stories are the man killing woman. And maybe my bias is coming in, but the fact that this is the woman killing the man, maybe it's just that, I'm a male and this has really just gotten to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the that whole thing of parading it around afterwards. That's maybe if she'd slipped away and just bought a house and was trying to hide it, wouldn't seem so nuts. But
going on TV, see, you're going on TV as a bereavement expert.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy there. I mean, say what you will about Josh Powell as a disgusting psychopath. He never did that.
Yeah.
I mean, he never did that. He never tried to profit off of his wife's death, allegedly. But most likely. I mean, it's just
so wild.
I mean, it's just that's talk about sick. So let's change the subject here, and then maybe this isn't the best thing to go straight into, but okay, let's change the subject, something a little bit lighter here. This is something that's gone viral here. This is a couple's hilariously confused reaction to missionaries on their doorstep. And this is from ldsliving.com. So here we've got this handsome guy here from Tom here. And this is Demi and Tom's TikTok video. This has been seen by millions of people. So the missionaries knocked on their door. I don't know, maybe it was your nephew here, not sure. But he knocked on their door. And their interaction here seems to have gone viral. I want to play the reaction that they posted here. And it's got, I don't know, millions and millions of views. It's got over 3 million views just in the last couple of days.
Why can't I say no?
A few moments earlier.
I think we're Mormons now.
Why do you think that?
I couldn't say no. They came and they knocked on the door and they wanted to read script from the Book of Mormon. And I was like, yeah, sure, read, go ahead. And now I think we're Mormon. Did you say what? Well, then I gave them my number.
Why?
They come back later in the week and ask me what I felt. There they are. They're walking. But then they asked me to come back and ask how I felt about the scripture or something. So now I'm gonna have to read it.
You're not obliged.
I think I'm Mormon now.
I don't think that's how it works.
That's how it works. Look.
Okay, so what do you think here? So the missionaries, this is exactly what the missionaries want. They come to your door, they knock on it, they give you the thing, and then you feel obliged to continue. When you look at the comments section on this, it's absolutely hilarious. Everybody is just like saying, well, hey, what are you doing? What? Oh, I can't believe this. This is the Mormon TikTok of the week here for the news roundup.
Well, I think it's great if people are nice. Be nice to my nephew if he knocks on your door and all that sorts of stuff. But even me, all these years, I've been in the church, ex-missionary, now ex-Mormon, all that sorts of stuff. I get friendly with people who are kind of activistic Mormons and missionaries and that sort of stuff, and I'm cool with them, and we are able to talk. And even I feel the same thing this guy feels. Like, oh, I had a good conversation with that Mormon guy who's a really hard apologist. And then they start pushing on you. They start pushing on you and say, hey, you can be baptized, hey, you can do this. And then you get off the thing like, well, we had a good converson. I guess I'm Mormon now again. But
now I love how he says, I guess we're Mormon now.
Yeah. I guess we're Mormon.
I guess we're Mormon now. If you look at the comments section, it says, you have no idea how nice it is to have a friendly face. Honestly, you can be nice to them. Even if you don't want to be Mormon, it's okay. I love this. See, the Mormons, they're feeding on this. I love this. Hi, I was a Mormon missionary. Seriously, don't feel guilty about saying no. It doesn't hurt our feelings. I love how he says we're Mormon, but not I, but we. You're in this together. I'm an ex-Mormon. Don't read the Book of Mormon. Thanks for being kind. They're just kids, but don't read it. Your kindness means a lot to them. Look, my personal take on this. If you're not, as a full-time missionary myself, if you're not interested in the Mormon missionary message, which is fine, that's your decision. Let me give you the best suggestion on how to deal with it. Don't open the door. It's just that simple. I would have people all the time who would open the door and just sit there and scream at me. You are a cult. You are in the wrong. You need to get with Jesus, or I'm an atheist and you're living your life in a delusion. They would just sit there and scream with you, and they would say, or they would open and say, don't say one word. Get off of my property. They'd be so upset and angry. But I would have already been gone if you hadn't opened the door. You know what I mean? If you don't answer the door, then the missionaries just go away. There's no reason, if you're not interested, to even answer the door. That's just my pro tip for the day. Any last thoughts on this one?
That's a great tip, and it's one of the things we point out a whole lot is, some of us, we declare atheism, but we, just like a lot of these different Mormons, will look back at their Mormon tribe and say, hey, you guys, sometimes we're being a bit jerks. Well, we look at atheists and the way they act sometimes and say, hey, you guys, we're kind of constantly touting that we're somehow better and more or whatever now that we've decided that we don't believe in something. But no, we can be jerks. There's jerky behavior everywhere. There's evangelical behavior in it everywhere, and there's screaming, yelling behavior. I 100% agree that we can all just chill off of each other. But then I also feel what that guy feels is like, yeah, you get real friendly and nice for somebody, and then they can kind of start like inching in. Go like, oh, come on, I'm being charitable to you, but I don't want to get baptized tomorrow.
I just had the missionaries over for dinner yesterday, so I gave them a pizza dinner. So I know how important it is to be nice to missionaries. That's obviously a good thing to do. So
yeah, thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. Now, this is not the only missionary thing that is trending here this week here as well. And here in Virginia, which is where I live, Northern Virginia here, we have Mormon missionaries doing another tactic here, which seems to be generating a lot of controversy. And this has received a lot of views here. These missionaries here, they're leaving their message in public libraries, and some people are taking issue with that. Let me play this for you. Hopefully this isn't your nephew, by the way.
A public library, and lately we've been finding these little cards in some of the books on the shelves. Recently I was shelving some YA and came across this one in The Lost Dreamer. The cards all have handwritten messages about how God has a plan, and if you want to know more, you can reach out. There's a phone number listed at the bottom. Printed on the card is a URL as well as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so you know the source. Especially with all of the challenges public libraries have been facing in the United States recently, it's disconcerting to find somebody proselytizing in the library. And realistically, it's many from so-called Christian communities that are coming into the libraries and calling the staff groomers and worse. So I was especially troubled to find this card in one of our young adult books, a young adult book that is an indigenous Mesoamerican story by a Mexican author. So there's an extra layer of colonialism here as well. With the increase of sex trafficking in my area, any kind of recruitment concerns me, and religious recruitment has no place in public libraries.
Your hot take on that, Chris?
Well, I hadn't heard that video, but my hot take is, and it's been my hot take around Salt Lake and all that stuff, is I agree religion should not be put into places that are public spheres, that aren't town squares. Things like public schools, things like class, things that are tax funded, but that also goes for your colonialism, whatever types of ideas. Like those are unfalsifiable theoretical beliefs that's some of the stuff that we get into. And yes, your general theories, your critical theories are as much religion. That's one of the arguments that James Lindsay makes on his podcast. And I support him and back him up in that idea that yes, we'll keep that religion out and you keep your religion out. Let's keep all the proselytizing out of the public libraries.
Yeah, I mean, but okay, you leave a note. Okay, I agree with that. A public sphere should be a place that is generally free of religion. We have a separation of church and state. That's why the Supreme Court has many, many times struck down the putting up the 10 Commandments in public places, because even though that is not an endorsement of a specific religion, it's an endorsement of religion in general. So yes, I definitely agree with that. But I do want to, wait a minute. I just want to say one thing. This is the librarian. You leave one note about your religion in a book, and now you're a colonialist? Isn't that taking things a little too far? Come on. It can't be that far, is it?
Yeah, it seems too far to me. And then there's some level of like, we'll let you guys preach your stuff if they preach our stuff. But at the same time, too, missionaries, you don't need to be doing that. There or some sort of stuff like that. But if it's going to be a hard line, I'm going to also put the hard line on your unfalsifiable beliefs.
And also, okay, so also you put a note into the book, into a young adult book, and now all of a sudden you're a sex trafficker. So you leave a note. A missionary leaves a note in a book and says, "Hey, if you have any questions about God or about the purpose of life, give me a call." Now you're a colonialist and you're a sex trafficker. Okay, isn't that? I mean, do we have to? Can't we just say, look? Okay, you're not supposed to do that. That's against the library rules, and please don't do it in the future. Do you have to tell people that they're a sex trafficker, a colonialist, and just I don't know, that you're an evil person just for leaving a note? Isn't that too far?
Seems too far. I mean, there could be validity on either side of it, because she mentioned that they get called groomers. We know that they've been doing all those types of things in a lot of different public libraries and places, such as drag time story hour and all that sorts of stuff. And everything's become a political space nowadays, and that's part of our postmodern moment. And it's hard to parse out. It really is.
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit too far here. That does take us to another tweet that came out here that I want to bring up here. This is a big episode, so hopefully you're still with me. But this is a tweet here from RFH at Hollow Thurf, and this tweet here has got I don't know, like 100,000 views, and it gives advice here about how to get a hot Mormon guy. And that definitely piques my interest here. So this is her advice here. Find a Mormon man and convert him away from his Bible fan fiction religion. They're tall, they have money, and they don't experience twink death because they don't drink alcohol. All around excellent material. Brandon Flowers is 41 and Mitt Romney is 76. So Brandon Flowers, he's 41, but he looks like he's 25. Mitt Romney, he's 76, and apparently he looks like he's 60. this is apparently how to get a hot Mormon guy. Now, if you look back at the photo that I had with your nephew, you will see that I'm not tall. I don't have that much money, and but I did have to look up the twink death. What twink death?
Yeah, that's a new thing floating around. Have you seen that?
Okay, yeah. So I looked this up. A twink death here, when a man who is previously described as a twink, which is typically at a young age, is shown later in life as particularly ugly. So in other words, twink death is you look good when you're young, but as you age, you get really ugly. So that's her point. Mormon men, when they age and they don't get uglier over time. In fact, maybe they get more handsome over time. Is this a good advice on how to snag a hot Mormon guy? Because you're single, Chris, and I don't know. Is this how you do it?
They don't drink. Well, it's true that if you treat your body better, you're gonna look better longer. So don't do the alcohols and all that sorts of stuff. But that twink death thing's hilarious. If you look it up, there's memes with it. Also, like Leonardo DiCaprio when he was a young twink, and then I'll show him in like the movie Up, which he was kind of specifically designed to look schlumpy in that, or Don't Look Up. But they're pointed out, and it's kind of a funny thing. It's real funny, kind of seeing the men just go from like this twinky little guy to kind of like a red-faced alcoholic or something like that. But if women are just into physical appearances, which I know that's the only thing they're all about, well, fine, maybe they're right, but that's not really the whole thing. But you're not gonna have a fun time trying to deconvert more people. I tried to do that with the girl I dated after, and it was a dumb, bad idea and shouldn't have done it. But
yeah, that's the catch here. It's kind of hard to convert him away from his Bible fan fiction religion. That's the catch, because that's really, really hard to do. They don't really like to do that.
And it's been I've mentioned it's been a problem in my life. 20 years out of the church. It's still I'm here on this podcast in the morning. It still dominates a lot of my life. There's no getting away, and it just goes and disappears. We all know you leave it and you can't leave it alone, even though we tend to do it. But like you can't take it out of them. It's in us. I've frequently said it's kind of like the Jewish thing. Like it really is part of us as almost an ethnicity. There's no taking it out of us, even if we resign or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And she also says that that Mormon men after this, they're excellent simp material. And a simp material is, the guy, he's always trying to get the girl, but she's always it's mostly guys towards girls, but she's always one step ahead of him. So he's always simping. He's always trying to get with her. This isn't the type of relationship that I would want to get into. I can just put it.
Well, the simping is that they treat them overly well, like gold, and do everything for them. And that's been one of the general themes of our whole thing too, is the general concept that you'll hear Bill Rill and RFM and everybody just repeat as if it's just some complete truth, which maybe there is in hierarchical setups of the patriarchy thing. But everything we've been up and around and grown around in our life is the Mormon men that we know in our lives do nothing but tap dance for the women in their lives, and that's the world we've been brought up in.
Yeah. Well, at least I try to do it in mine, but probably not as successful as I could be. That's for sure. Now, the church also has got a long-awaited. We've been hinting about this for a while. This has been leaking here. The church's position on transitioning has finally gotten an update here, and I'm going off the churches. This is talking about trans persons in particular. I'm going to read this whole thing, get your reaction on it, and get your comments on it. And this is pretty short here, but the church did update the General Handbook of Instruction about transitioning, and it's only a small update, but let's just go over it real quick here. Church leaders counsel against elective medical or surgical intervention for the purpose of attempting to transition to the opposite gender of a person's birth, that is sex reassignment. Leaders advise that taking these actions will be cause for church membership restrictions that used to be called disfellowship. Now, leaders also counsel against social transitioning. A social transition includes changing dress or grooming, or changing a name or pronouns to present oneself as other than his or her birth sex. Leaders advise that those who socially transition will experience some church membership restrictions for the duration of this transition. Restrictions include receiving or exercising the priesthood, receiving or using a temple recommend, and receiving some church callings. Although some privileges of the church membership are restricted, other church participation is welcome. Transgender individuals who do not pursue medical, surgical, or social transition to the opposite gender and are worthy may receive church callings, temple recommends, and temple ordinances. Some children, youth, and adults are prescribed hormone therapy by a licensed medical profession to ease gender dysphoria or reduce suicidal thoughts. Before a person begins such therapy, it is important that he or she and the parents of a minor understand the potential risks and benefits. If these members are not attempting to transition to the opposite gender and are worthy, they may receive church callings, temple recommends, and temple ordinances. And finally, if a member decides to change his or her preferred name or pronouns of address, the name preference may be noted in the preferred name field on the membership record. The person may be addressed by the preferred name in the ward. So the church does not take a position on the cause of people identifying themselves as transgender. So the two things that I take away from this is, number one, pronouns. Pronouns are now okay. So if you want to be addressed as a different pronoun, church has no policy with that. And also, if you're prescribed hormonal therapy, then you can still receive particular ordinances. It's really the surgical stuff that the church really comes down on. But this is I would say, a mild improvement from the state of affairs as it has been. What are your thoughts on the new transgender policy here, Chris?
Well, I mean, the church sets its own limits and all that sorts of stuff. And I've just like it happened earlier with David Archuleta's mom, I've been a proponent that if it's not working for you, what you should do is move away from it. But the so as far as their policies go, I'm libertarian in that sense of that they can control their destiny of how they think that stuff should go. As far as that other stuff goes, I'd highly recommend. It's probably one of the reasons why Jonathan wasn't able to last as long with you, because he's had his head so deep into this concept of transgenderism and trans children. He's done a lot of good work and he put up a lot of different stuff about it. He's concerned about it as a physician and all that sorts of stuff. I'm concerned about it too in general. The church isn't really kind of putting a hard stance in there. They're just kind of saying like where you stand ecclesiastically if you get into that sort of thing. But I think it's an area that there's so many people who want to cock their heads back and say the science is settled. And no, it is not. And that's one of the things that Michael Shermer has been talking about that gets us kicked off of Mormon Stories board. But he's talking about it constantly on Twitter right now. And he's going on to Mormon Stories as a featured guest in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Jonathan Streeter has covered that quite a bit on the Thoughts and Things to Stuff channel. And this is an area that I definitely have absolutely no expertise in. But it is interesting to see that the pronouns are now okay. Hormonal therapy is also now okay. And that seems to be, I would say, a minor step forward. So we have two last articles here that we want to get through. And this is a very interesting, this is from the Deseret News here. The religious term you should try to stop using. And when I very first saw this, I thought for sure it was going to be the word Mormon here, Chris. But no, that is not the religious term you should try to stop using. And this is from Kelsey Dallas here, published on May 9th, 2023. And it's a growing group of scholars, journalists, and others recommend against labeling a faith group as a cult. So it seems like the Deseret News, it says, you know what, we shouldn't be calling people cults. And it shows a picture here of the Branch Davidians. And, they are often described by a cult by a number of different people. And this article was first published in the State of Faith newsletter. And, one of the reasons is that they say that the word cult evokes a powerful emotional reaction. And the church doesn't want anyone to label itself as a cult, and therefore it doesn't label anybody else as a cult. Is the word cult here, is that a useful term, or is it a pejorative that should be avoided? What do you think?
I think a lot of people have, and I've looked at it, pointed at it academically, that no, it is not useful. It's too vague. It's too much of a thing that doesn't have a specific definition. I've seen some definitions that I like of it, and they actually have more to do with pragmatics of how long something's lasted before it's blown itself out of the water or not. Once again, Jonathan's made a whole website that's called "Is It Culty?"
Yeah,
and he started saying well, look, we can talk about things seeming culty and we can rank it on some sort of a spectrum, and we get into that. And one of the deals, I did that whole entire website on the concept of bodybuilding, and I ranked it pretty high culty wise, and so it can get to that there. I'll recommend somebody else. I don't know that he has a channel, but he's popped up on Jacob Hansen's channel. His name is Jacob Mayberry, but also Dan McClellan has gone into detail about how that term is not a very useful or accurate or predictive term. And I generally kind of agree with it. If you watch the Mormon Stories entire thing where they had on Stephen Hassan and everything that he called cultish and his bite model, there's a lot of criticism about that stuff. But you can also see how they were very, very activists as toward they start out. It's one of the things that they do that we're critical of. We're not going to call it a cult. And then you can watch every one of those episodes and see them call it a cult again and again and again and again and again.
Exactly. I had Randy Bell on this program, who's the master of disaster, and he's covered some of these so-called cults as well. And he talked about how, for instance, the Heaven's Gate cult, he calls it the cult of cults. And, I personally, I find the term somewhat offensive, and right, it is nebulous. That the definition of a cult really is basically a religion or a religious system or a paradigm of some sort that I don't agree with and I think is harmful. And of course, that is a very subjective, and a very hot button term. I do, as you mentioned, I do find that Jonathan Streeter's Is It Culty website here, .com, isitculty.com, where you can go through a particular assessment of your particular beliefs, and it goes about thought control, money, sex, where you're going in the afterlife. Am I in a cult? This is itculty.com. I think it is pretty valuable. So, I mean, those are some quick thoughts. Any last wrap up on the Jesuit News saying, is cult a bad word? Is there a scholarly consensus that we should be avoiding it? Or is it just the church saying, hey, we don't want to be called a cult. We want to be called a nice Christian religion?
Yeah, I think it should be saved for those moments where you really are dealing with something that's like you said, a cult of cults. I think those are real, but I mean, maybe we'd get the term back if we got more accurate with it.
Absolutely. Now that does bring us to our final news article of the week here. And this is the news article here, Chris, that I asked you not to look at here.
I'm excited. What is it?
So is the Salt Lake Temple getting a new feature? From the Deseret News, Tad Welch, May 7th, 2023. This goes along with our Mormon News Roundup poll of the week. So I was greatly wondering what this new feature was going to be. And I kind of put together my top 10 list of features that I think could improve the Salt Lake Temple. I want you to be the first person here to take our poll on it. And for those listeners out there in the live chat, you can also weigh in on which feature it is that you think that is going to be best for the Salt Lake Temple. We release all of these Mormon News Roundup episodes on at 7:30 p.m. Utah time and 9:30 p.m. Sundays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when you can interact with your humble host here when we release the episodes live. So are you ready for this, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Here is number one. I think that the Salt Lake Temple could use some additional second anointing rooms for the Ensign Peak Shell Company managers and their wives. I mean, because there's a lot of guys that took the fall. I mean, those guys, they literally put their credentials. They could have been criminally charged. Falsifying 13F forms. You can be criminally charged for that. Those guys really, they put themselves out there. And I think it could be time to reward them with some second anointings. And that's a lot of guys. There's a lot of shell companies. You may need some extra space for that. That's why I'm saying, hey, why don't we put together an additional second anointing room for those guys and their wives? What do you think about that?
Seems fair. Looks like they might have been able to get a $279 million thing if they had whistleblown, but
yeah.
Nope. So you might as well give them a second anointing.
That's right. They passed up on the $300 million. They put themselves criminally on the line. They passed up $300 million. If you're not going to give the second anointing to those guys, I don't know who you're going to give it to. Now, this is Chris. I'm going to check your Mormon bona fides here. Who's this little figure here on the right?
Nope, no idea.
Tom Phillips. He's the one who leaked the. We learned about this. Yeah, that was a tough one. I don't blame you. That's a tough one. So yeah, the second anointing is where you're literally cleansed from the blood and sins of this generation, not just prepared as such. And once you have your second anointing, then you have given the green light. And here's you get your feet and hands and everything washed. I guess it's just your feet washed by an apostle. So yeah, I think that's number one. That's a new feature that I would love to see. Or is it?
I'll come back if you can give me a second anointing right at the start. That's what I'll put down there.
Hey, I don't think anybody could argue for that. Or is it number two? This is a top 10 list. Or is it number two? We should bring back the spittoons. Now, the original New Name Noah was back in 1911, and he snuck into the Salt Lake Temple and took pictures of the entire edifice, everything in it. And what they found is in the Quorum of the 12's, their special room, that there's some spittoons that were on the ground for their chewing tobacco to spit them in the side in those spittoons. So yeah, I think we should bring back the spittoons because it'll be a little bit more friendly to people who don't necessarily live the word of wisdom. That's my second suggestion.
One of the bad things that I have done a few times since I left is smoke some cigars and stuff. So yes, you could get me back with this one too. I mean, all these things are going my way. Like I'm absolutely coming back.
Hey, if it was good enough for the Quorum of the 12 Apostles in the early 1900s, this was 1911, then I think it should be good enough for Chris Hanna. That's all I'm saying.
Or how about back? Let's see what's happening.
Absolutely. Or number three, this is also my next suggestion: full body jetted tubs with cinnamon whiskey for initiatory. So it used to be in the initiatories here that there was you're washing and anointings. And this is again those leaked photos from 1911. The temple had 10 rooms where the washing ordinance was performed in a bathtub. It used to be that you got into the bathtub for your initiatory, butt naked. Okay, you have this shriveled up old white guy over here who's going to be touching you in various areas. Why don't we make this a little bit more 2023? Let's make these full body jetted tubs. Let's make it more like a spa experience. Let's get a full kind of a spa experience. Let's go back. They used to wash people with cinnamon whiskey for this. Now I know you're a teetotaler, so maybe that's not right up your alley, but I think we're trying to get into your neck of the woods here, Chris.
You're talking me back into. I want to be into your cult. Like if you make the ideas, I'm back in.
Watch that cult word. Watch that C word. Okay.
No, I'm with it now. I'm
okay.
I'm reconciling it. Like
I like what I'm hearing here. Any of these three are good. Or how about maybe we need a second Holy of Holies room just for Susan's husband, because we all know that Bednar is going to be getting the green light here, barring a catastrophe. And, maybe he needs his own room here so that he can practice, be in there on his own. I think a second Holy of Holies room just for Susan's husband, I think that would be a nice touch for him, since he is going to be the prophet in about 10 years. What do you think?
You lost me. Like, bring back those other 3, but anything for Bednar.
You're setting him in his own room. You're putting him in his own space.
All right, I'm back. I'm back in. I get
See,
it.
you're getting him away from anybody else. He has his own room. He's in his own space. He's away from everybody. I thought that this would be a plus.
Segregate the Bednar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm back in.
Okay. Now is the great day of my power. Or how about let's bring back the banned murals. Now, it used to be that inside of the various different temples, they got rid of the murals back in, I think it was 2018, because some of these murals were considered somewhat insensitive. And this picture here is of Jesus. If you're on the right hand, if you paid your tithing, if you had your second anointing, you get to be on the right side over here. But if you're on the left side here, if you didn't get the full fast offering, you didn't clean your chapel toilets here, you're on the left hand side here. And they got rid of these murals back in 2018 because they were considered, some of them were very insensitive here. Maybe we should just bring them back. Why do we have to be so politically correct? But the one thing about this mural here, Chris, is I was looking and I really found somebody who really looks a lot like you. It's this guy right here. Did you happen to did you sit for a portrait for this, or is that just a doppelganger?
I was there at that moment, I guess. On the dark side of stuff.
But I also found myself over here. I'm over here.
You're on the good side.
Don't be offended, though. I mean, it's nothing. Don't take this too hard, okay? Look, just because I'm on the right side, it's not that big of a deal. It's
I accept my place. I accept my place in the eternities.
Okay, maybe we should bring back these banned murals, because they really give people, especially when the visitors are going through, who are the not members of the church, when they go through there, they see these banned murals. It really gives them a special feeling. Maybe we should bring those back, or maybe we should. We used to have cafeterias in the basement of the temples, in the 17 largest temples. We used to have cafeterias. Did you ever eat in one of those cafeterias, Chris?
I did, and I remember the really crappy Wonder Bread sandwich that.
Yeah, exactly. But let's upgrade them. Let's have IKEA contractors run them this time, so that way we can get the meatballs. And the problem with those cafeterias, though, Chris, is actually the biggest. I think the reason that they shut them down is the fact that they used to serve fruit out of season in them, which is against the word of wisdom.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're in the house of the Lord eating fruit out of season. That is directly contradicting Doctrine and Covenants section 89. No wonder they shut it down.
Someday I'm going to be sitting there eating a meatball, smoking a cigar, sitting in whiskey, not seeing Bednar, and I'm just going to be like, I'm so happy I came. This works.
What's not to like? Now, this is an actual picture of somebody who's inside the temple, and you have to wear the white outfits here. Is that white and delightsome, or is that pure and delightsome? I always get those two mixed up.
Yeah.
I think it's white and delightsome. You don't have to wear the white clothes there, so that's true. Or maybe we need extra strong locks in the locker rooms to protect white geriatrics from woke Generation Z progmos. This is an actual picture of the locker room here, where you have a locker for the whites only, those little white aprons. You have the aprons, you have the baker's uniforms. Maybe we need those Generation Z progmos. Why do you have locks in the locker room in the temple again? I'm not sure, but probably to protect us all from those woke Generation Z progmos. That's just what I'm guessing. I don't have the exact answer.
Looks like you're still trying to talk me back, but although I'm not one to my last girlfriends were Venezuelans, so I don't need that much segregation.
Okay, got it. Or maybe we need luxurious green rooms for the live actors. They didn't really have a good spot. And by the way, this picture is from under the banner of heaven. It's not from Nune No. So this is technically not the inside of a temple. I got that. But maybe we need, a green room with maybe some, light refreshments for those actors. So when they come out, they'll be nice and fresh and ready to rock and roll. It seems like we need an upgrade on that.
Paradise.
And by the way, does anybody have Chris Hannah's phone number? By the way, I don't know. I think that's what she's asking. Now, also, or maybe this is what we need: robust closed circuit camera network utilizing top of the line facial recognition software programmed specifically to stop Nune Noah. Yeah, those closed circuit cameras. It's got the software, so if his face is anywhere near that temple, boom, they got it. That seems like a pretty good.
You got to keep him out.
Yeah, we need some facial recognition software. Nune Noah, Porchtime. GTFO.
Nice.
We don't need no porch time.
Isn't that him?
Yeah, that's him getting arrested, by the way.
Yeah.
That is literally a picture of him getting arrested at the South Jordan Temple. That's why there's a closed circuit camera, for all of his buddies. Maybe we need some of that to upgrade. Or maybe we need theater reclining seats in the endowment rooms. Nice luxury. They probably need to be white, but, you lay down, you got yourself some popcorn, you got yourself a cool beverage. It's a little bit more relaxing of an atmosphere here. Reclining seats in the endowment rooms. What do you think?
It's all sounding good. Everything's looking up.
But the problem is that you're not going to be getting any caffeinated beverages. You know what I mean?
I'm out. I need that.
Oh,
this is just my first of the day, and
well, that could be a deal breaker then, huh?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be getting any of that in the endowment room. So, which of these temple features do you want to see most here? Now, for those of you who are in the live chat, we appreciate you being in the live chat. If you will drop your number into the live chat of which of these features do you want to see most in the Salt Lake Temple, we greatly appreciate it. Is it number one, the second anointing rooms for the EPA shell company?
One of these is real. Is one of these real?
Well, I don't want to spoil
Are you saying
it for
what's the most favorite one?
It just says which of these temple features do you want to see most out of these 10 here? Spittoons are number 3. The hot tubs are number 4. A new second of Holy of Holies for Susan's husband. Number 5, the band bring back the band murals. Number 6, the IKEA cafeterias. Number 7, better locks. Or number 8, luxurious green rooms. Or number 9, closed circuit TV and facial recognition for Nune Nose cohort inspired crew. Or number 10, recliner seats and popcorn service in endowment rooms. Which one of those 10 do you most want to see, Chris? If you were in charge, which one would you want to see most?
Spittoons.
Okay. All right. Nice. Hey, they used to be in there, so hey, yeah, why not? So the problem here, Chris, is as you probably well know, we aren't getting any of those. Sorry. So, but what we are
I thought you tricked me that one of those is real. Like
it'd be nice, but unfortunately, we're not getting what we are getting here, Chris, is a stone on the ground. That's what we're getting is a stone with a scripture from Isaiah will now be on Temple Square, and it's from Isaiah chapter 2 verse 22. And this is what I thought we were getting something good. Instead, this new feature, we're just literally getting a stone on the ground.
I'm having the feeling that you have whenever you say general conference is coming up and much will be revealed, and then that comes and you go, oh.
Is this the greatest manifestation of the Savior's power that we've ever heard? This is the reason that we wanted to take our vitamins and get plenty of rest, was to get this stone on the ground.
Well, it's a hint that they're stonemasons. They're giving it away.
The craziest thing is I actually watched a video about this particular scripture just last night on Isaiah chapter 2 verse 2 from Uncorrelated Mormonism. What is his name? Rob. I can't remember his last name, but he talked about how Isaiah chapter 2 verse 2 has absolutely nothing to do with Salt Lake City and the temple, which is kind of ironic considering that is what the verse is on. I want to shout out thanks to our patrons here, Foxboy, Mark S, Wendy T, Michael L, Eric, and Sophronia. I want to thank you so much, Chris, for coming on. You lasted a heck of a lot longer than Jonathan Streeter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I dropped a lot of Jonathan Streeter info on it for you to make up for it. So
it's all good. It's all good. I'm just kidding around. Our new episodes for Mormon News Roundup, they go live on YouTube Sundays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have the chance, Chris, to drop in with us, you can interact with the live chat on Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We greatly appreciate that. And I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on Bandcamp.com for this episode's music. And thanks so much for ruminating with me on Great and Spacious Beehive. And remember, no one held a hand can stop this podcast from progressing. So long.
See ya. Thanks.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.